If there's one thing Nintendo has become increasingly efficient at, it's their ability to obscure lore and story details in their Zelda trailers. They show just enough to get people talking while at the same time preserving a high degree of ambiguity, to keep us guessing. It's no exaggeration to say that we could easily have a 2-hour discussion on just who this one character is supposed to be. Is it Hylia? An ancient hero? Ganondorf? Tingle? Or, judging by Nintendo's track record, it could be a completely new character, one we've never seen before, and so all our theories go out the window. No matter how confident you are in your own assessment, it's safe to say that for now all we have is best guesses, as the characters depicted are purposely designed in a way that makes them unlike anything we can immediately recognize from previous titles. I've been staring at screenshots for hours, and while I do have my own ideas and suspicions, so far I've been unable to find substantial evidence that nails it down. So for today's video, let's put this part of the lore aside for a moment and focus on something else. A far more important question, perhaps. Why do bokoblins and moblins suddenly have massive penises? Today we're talking about the surface world of Tears of the Kingdom, which as we all know is basically a rehash of the landscape we explored in the previous title. PR-wise, Tears of the Kingdom's main focus ever since the 2021 teaser has been on the skies above the ill-fated kingdom, which is now littered with these majestic floating landmasses that have seemingly sprung up from nowhere. Even the official artwork, including the box art, emphasize that in Tears of the Kingdom, the sky is where it's at. There's been a couple of video analyses which focus on the differences between Breath of the Wild's overworld and the one seen in Tears of the Kingdom. In conclusion, well, aside from a few notable changes to specific landmarks, the two aren't all that different, almost identical even. So what purpose does the surface have left, besides providing solid footing when you're not soaring in the skies above? Of course, it is from ground level that we'll be gaining access to some of the islands, as seen in the example where Link rewinds a piece of fallen sky debris and rides it up to the island it originated from. But this is just a means by which to escape the surface, so what about Hyrule itself? Are there new things to explore here? New dungeons and challenges? 9,000 Korok seeds this time?
No! God, please, no! No!
I think there may be a lot more to Hyrule's surface than the promotional material has let on so far. Though it may look very similar from a distance, you can't judge a book by its cover. So let's go over some of the possibilities. Do keep in mind that just like with the main story, most of what I'm about to talk about is highly speculative and may not reflect the final product. In fact, it probably won't. With that said, let's get into it. In the footage presented so far, Tears of the Kingdom's surface has been shown quite sparingly, and when it does show up, it's in specific lighting and from clever camera angles that make it difficult to see the finer details. Despite this, we have been able to spot a few changes over the past years, ever since the game's reveal in 2019. The most notable of which are that the Sheikah Towers and shrines are no longer present, Hyrule Castle has been ripped from its foundation and is now suspended in the air by Ganon's malice, the Deku Tree and possibly the entire Great Forest are no longer where they should be, there are strange pieces of debris scattered about which weren't there before, and Death Mountain's lava flow has seemingly run dry. The mystery behind the last two of these observations have now been cleared up by the third teaser. The unknown debris is confirmed to originate from the floating islands, and as mentioned before, you can use them to hitch a ride up. Death Mountain has dried up because it's plugged up by malice, which can be seen boiling up from the summit. But there's another big change which a lot of people initially missed, for good reason, because it's not actually shown in the teaser itself, but instead in the official artwork Nintendo made public shortly after the teaser went live. Here too we see the malice-written Death Mountain, the floating Hyrule Castle, and another peculiar sight. A gigantic vortex covering a large area west of the castle. Judging from the size comparison to the other two landmarks, this storm has to be about the same size, if not bigger than Death Mountain itself, which on its own is so massive that it almost takes up an entire province. There's still a debate going on in regards to which part of the map specifically has been engulfed by this giant storm. There's been suggestions of the Hebra Mountains, Rito Village, the Forgotten Temple. Some even think it may be as far south as Satori Mountain. I personally believe that anything below Rito Village is improbable. If we line up the positions in the artwork, we can see that the storm is approximately to the west, maybe slightly northwest of the castle. This would place it somewhere in this general area. We can also see a long canyon-like depression in the landscape between the vortex and the castle. And if I had to guess, this would have to be Tanagar Canyon, the giant gorge that spans from the Gerudo Highlands in the south all the way up north and separates central Hyrule from the Hebra province. If this is indeed Tanagar Canyon, this eliminates places like Satori and the Forgotten Temple and narrows it down to Hebra alone, as it's the only province that lies west of the canyon. My top two contenders right now are Rito Village and Hebra Peak, and I'm currently leaning more towards the the latter, for a couple of reasons. Primarily the fact that we don't see Hebra Peak anywhere in the artwork, which is a bit strange. The summit of Hebra is one of the highest peaks on the map, only slightly outclassed by Death Mountain, and the two even share approximately the same latitude as well. The mountain and its iconic look, that being the massive hole carved into its peak, should stand out quite clearly, and yet it's nowhere to be seen, so it might be in the eye of the storm. This location was also severely underutilized in Breath of the Wild, especially given its size, and for another reason I'll get to in a bit, this is currently my best bet. I don't want to obsess over the exact location for too long, because I do realize that depictions of Hyrule in artworks like these are often stylistic and not always accurate to the actual in-game map. What is important is the tribe who call this province home. Whether the vortex is situated at Hebra Peak or Rito Village, the storm as depicted in the artwork looks big enough that it would spell serious trouble for the Rito's way of life regardless, and may even cover both areas. After all, Rito Village lies right at the foot of the mountain range, and their training facility, the flight range, lies even closer. In my visual concept, I happen to choose Hebra Peak, mostly because it looks cool. But Rito Village is a strong contender as well. Perhaps it lies at the eye of the storm, with its inhabitants trapped inside, unable to escape. But even if the village lies at the edge of it, it would still pose a serious problem. Imagine the immense forces one would endure so close to a tornado of this size. The wind speeds, blizzards, flying debris, and the freezing temperature of the area. I doubt it would be a pleasant experience for our feathered friends. I think it's quite interesting that a significant plot point like this was shown in artwork alone. There's only one very brief moment in the footage that alludes that something might be happening in Hebra, and it's so subtle that it only works in context, knowing what we know now from the artwork. In the first few frames of the final shot where Link is in freefall, we can see a patch of dark clouds on the left side of the screen, and below that we can see the snowy border of the Hebra province. This may seem trivial, I mean it's just a few clouds, but the weather system in Breath of the Wild didn't work like that. You can see this for yourself the next time you play the game. You will never see an isolated patch of rain or thunder clouds hanging above one specific area. When the sky changes, it changes globally, as far as the eyes can see, even in places that don't match that weather condition. You'll see rain clouds above the Gerudo Desert, only to fast travel there and find it dry and sunny, and now suddenly the place you came from is too. Logically speaking, a place like Faron, which is notorious for its frequent rainfall and thunderstorms, should oftentimes have dark clouds hanging above it when viewed from a distance. But it doesn't, unless the weather is also bad where you are. I don't know exactly how it works, and I'm getting sidetracked again, but the skybox seems to be localized or tied to Link's position on the map or something. The only exception to the rule are special events that are disconnected from the global weather system. An example being the thunderstorm hanging above Thundra Plateau, which is always present no matter the weather conditions or time of day. So either Tears of the Kingdom has a completely new weather system, which is possible, or these dark clouds are part of the very edge of the storm tormenting Hebra. It could even be both. My obsessive talk about storms, clouds, and weather aside, what does it all mean for Hyrule's surface in general? I mean, one additional storm is nice and all, and big as it may be, it doesn't exactly make a huge difference considering the size of the map in its entirety. So maybe this storm is not the end of it. You'll notice that most of the changes we've been able to spot so far all correlate to specific people or factions from Breath of the Wild. The Hylian Seat of Power, Death Mountain, home of the Gorons, the missing Deku Tree, spirit guardian of the Koroks, and now this giant storm potentially terrorizing the Rito. I don't think I'm alone when I say that there seems to be a pattern here. These are all beings and factions who stood against Ganon in some way, either providing support on the day of the calamity or 100 years after the apocalypse when the hero woke up for a rematch. Now that the true face behind the calamity, Ganondorf himself, is back in the flesh, it is to be expected that he would target those who foiled his scheme to take over Hyrule. These four factions already check the box, but there's also the Gerudo, Sheikah, and the Zora. The total number of races that stood against Ganon and currently still inhabit Hyrule amounts to 7. I'm excluding the Yiga as they are basically just Sheikah turned evil. Is it a coincidence then that we happen to see this godlike figure surrounded by 7 orbs? Many have made the connection that the 7 orbs could correspond to 7 dungeons, with a possible 8th and final one, as Zelda games tend to have. The numbers 7 and 8 are quite prevalent in Breath of the Wild, and the series as a whole for that matter. The most notable are the 7 heroine statues, plus the secret 8th heroine, which is said had to have been wiped from history. We have all the imagery referencing the 7 sages, the 7 races of the kingdom with the Zonai possibly being the missing 8th, not to mention Breath of the Wild's Hyrule is divided into 8 provinces. The only problem is we haven't seen substantial footage of any location belonging to the other factions. There's not a single frame of Zora's domain. Kakariko Village, which is barely visible in this shot, is too far away to confirm any changes, and the home of the Gerudo is obscured by the highlands that wrap around the entire province, so we can't say for sure if these areas are also struck by disaster. The pattern suggests that they probably are, but right now we have no proof of this. Of course, the fact that we don't see these afflictions from afar in some of these wide shots doesn't mean they don't exist. For all we know, the waters of Zora's domain could be poisoned or something, and the Gerudo are being tortured by an endless loop of Darude sandstorm. The orbs depicted on the mural could represent some sort of balance or stability, a balance which could have been corrupted by Ganondorf, leading to all kinds of disasters across Hyrule's provinces. And in order to cure this imbalance, Link has to visit some sort of ancient temples or shrines to, well, you know how it generally goes in Zelda games. Another possibility is that these orbs are the key to restoring the Master Sword in some way, which Ganondorf is aware of, and the many calamities plaguing these regions are simply him trying to prevent Link from getting to them. If there are indeed bigger, more classic dungeons present in Tears of the Kingdom, I think it's more than possible that most, if not all of them, are found on the surface or below it, as opposed to in the skies above. It would give a new and important purpose to the lands of Hyrule. It's one more reason why I chose Hebra Peak as my prime candidate for the Eye of the Storm as opposed to Rito Village, as it would be a perfect location to house a secret temple of sorts. We have proof that the Hebra Mountains have all sorts of caves and secret chambers inside them, some of them hidden behind man-made doors like the enormous cave that houses one of the great skeletons. So what about the islands in the sky then? What purpose would they serve if dungeons end up being on the surface below? Well, it could be that the means to access these ancient temples are obtained here, like certain powers for Link's new bracelet, for example. It's not uncommon for a Zelda game to hide key items necessary to gain access to a dungeon somewhere else in the overworld. By traveling to the sky and learning new abilities, you would be able to unlock new areas at ground level. Now, this may sound like it would be an extremely linear experience, but that doesn't have to be the case at all. If you can visit the many islands in any order you please, it means that the dungeons too can be tackled in any order, just like in Breath of the Wild. It goes without saying that this is all conjecture. Maybe dungeons are present in the sky. Maybe the surface world serves a completely different purpose. Maybe these are just stylistic depictions of a loincloth. You may have noticed while talking about this stuff happening on the surface that I primarily used footage from the newest teaser as opposed to the other two. This is because in the older footage, some things we've talked about like the storm in Hebra are different or not yet present. We can see Hebra Peak right behind the castle in this shot, and yet there's nothing unusual about it. While it could be that this takes place earlier in the story, before some of these cataclysms manifest, it's also obvious that Nintendo is constantly adding things and making changes to the game as they go along. Death Mountain initially didn't have Malice erupting from its summit. The bottom of the floating islands used to look like natural rock formations, while in the recent footage, most of them have these man-made antennas all of a sudden. And there are many more examples of changes and things being moved around as development progresses, which is only natural. I mean, think back at how different Breath of the Wild looked in some of the early footage. All we can do is guess, which is a big part of the fun of anticipation, at least for me. And there's so much more to theorize about. By the looks of it, Tears of the Kingdom has one of the broadest set of goals and mysteries in any Zelda game to date. The broken Master Sword, the curse on Link's arm, Zelda's disappearance and if and how we'll get her back, the catastrophes inflicted on Hyrule's people, the mystery and legacy of the Zonai, so on and so forth. Anyway, that is all for today. A big shout out to my mods, Discord community, everyone who's been sharing ideas and theories with me in the past week or so, and of course my Patreons and channel members, of which William Charles and Sam T joined recently, so a big thanks to the both of you, it means a lot. I have plenty of ideas to work with in the coming weeks, so I hope you look forward to future videos. This is Don signing off, and have a good one.